Hello, so good morning and a very warm welcome to this Royal Voluntary Service session. We're going to be looking at the carers element of universal credit itself. So if we could just move on to the next slide. So my name's Adam Matthews. I'm the Social Delivery Manager at Society Matters. My background is I have been a benefit specialist for well over I don't even like to think about it, a good 8 to 10 years. So my speciality is supporting people with benefits. This is quite a fitting session for me to deliver, as I'm actually a carer myself, and I do rely on the carers elements of universal credit to help support my family. So if we could just move on to the next slide there, thank you. So in terms of our aims and learning objectives today, what we're going to look at is a 30-minute session, and there will be some time at the end to answer any questions that you may have. We're going to have a look at who's eligible, so the eligibility for the carers element of universal credit itself. How much is it worth? How do we apply? How does it fit in with carers allowance as well? Very, very important. It's very much a separate benefit. A lot of people that might not be entitled to carers allowance because they're earning too much may well be entitled to the carers element. So really, really important we just differentiate between the two. We'll also have a look at what other support might be available to carers, and we'll have that Q&A at the end. So as the session goes on, please do pop into the chat where you're joining us from. If you do have any questions, I will make sure I can do my best to answer them questions at the end of the session today. But we are due to run for around half an hour there. So if we could just move on to the next slide, thank you. So in terms of who are we at Society Matters, so we are actually the trading subsidiary of Citizens Advice Gateshead. So we do lots of courses. We use the expertise that we have from Citizens Advice, and we put that into the courses that we develop. So we've got courses on housing and homelessness. We actually do have a carers and caring matters course itself, universal credit. You can check them out on our website. But the background behind the course, basically, all the profits that we do make, they do go back into the charity. And as you know, with the cost of living as we have it at the moment, that does make a big difference, as it means we can get more advisors on the front line. So just a few of the people that we've worked there, as well as the Royal Voluntary Service, who we're very happy to be working alongside. Just some of the groups that you can see there that we've worked with as well. So if we could just move on to the next slide itself. So just before we get started, let's have a look at the carers landscape in the UK. So the most recent census that's available, and that's from Carers UK, there's actually 5.8 million unpaid carers in the UK now. So quite a large amount. That's 1.7 million people in the UK that are providing 50 or more hours of care per week. So very much a large chunk of that person's time. Also in 2024, the GP patient survey found that 70% of carers said they themselves have actually got a long-term physical or mental health condition, disability or illness. So lots of carers, not only are they struggling to look after people that have long-term health conditions or disabilities, but they themselves do have them as well. So when you factor in that a lot of these carers will be working as well, they're going to have very little time to navigate what's already a very complex benefit system. So really, really important that if you might yourself be a carer, to reach out for support, or if you are supporting someone as well, just to make sure they get a full benefit check. Once people do get through to Citizens Advice, obviously we are very busy on the front line at the moment. We can do a full benefit check for the household within kind of half an hour. So really important that we just get people that support as soon as possible. If we could just move on to the next slide. When it comes to carers and finances, obviously carers are one of the groups that are really struggling with the cost of living crisis. One of the reasons behind that is carers allowance, for example, is one of the lowest paid benefits. There has been calls to uprate. We have seen a recent uprate into some of the benefits, but when you put that against the cost of living at the moment, they are one of the groups that are really, really struggling. So you can see there, research commissioned by Carers UK found that there's 1.2 million unpaid carers that are living in poverty and 400,000 that are living in deep poverty. I expect them figures to have risen, especially in the last couple of years as we've seen costs really going up. Carers UK also found that 61% of unpaid carers are worried about living costs and managing the future. A quarter of carers are really struggling to make ends meet, and 28% of carers are cutting back on essentials like food and heating as well. So this is why it's really important we just make sure that carers are getting everything that they are entitled to. Thank you. If we could just move on to the next slide there. So carers and employment as well. So that census data does show that 3 million carers aged between 16 and over in the UK are actually in paid employment, and 2.7 million carers are not in paid employment. So 2.6 million people that have given up work to care. That's something that's constantly ongoing. There's actually 600 people that have to give up work a day to become a full-time carer. So as we all know, it could happen to any one of us. A family member, could be sons, daughters, grandparents. Quite often people get ill and people take that caring responsibility on very quickly. So 600 people a day. So if you do become a carer overnight as well, you've got to navigate that benefit system. So really important. I know quite a lot of people will have joined our sessions before about the different elements of universal credit, but the carers element itself is one that quite often gets missed. And the reason behind that is it's quite a complex system, as we all know, the benefit system itself. So again, them full benefit checks, really, really important. So if we could just move on to the next slide there. Thank you. So what is the carers element of universal credit itself? So it is one of the 6 elements. It is worth £201.68 per month. You do need to be caring for that person 35 hours per week on average. Now, that 35 hours a week might not mean that you're physically with that person all of the time. You could be doing things to support that person, such as picking up prescriptions, sorting out appointments. It could be potentially that you're giving emotional support as well, checking in on people over the phone, sending messages on WhatsApp. Could be that you're traveling to meet that person. Could be tidying the house up for them as well. Of course, them physical care needs are really, really important as well, and they do count. So could be that you're helping that person wash and bathe. It could potentially be that you are preparing meals. Anything that person needs to support does count towards that 35 hours. Now, a lot of people look at that 35 hours and they think, I'm not quite sure that my care for that person adds up to 35 hours. One thing that we do recommend is keeping a care diary. A lot of people, once they keep that care diary, find that they're well over that 35 hours per week itself. So one thing that we do recommend. When it gets to the other qualifying thing for carers allowance, it's really important. They do need to be what's called the qualifying benefits. And this might be something that we have to do first. So if somebody gets ill quite quickly, it's really important that we get them on that qualifying benefit. So them qualifying benefits are DLA for children. If they get the middle rate or the highest rate for what's called the care component. Now, disability living allowance for children is for children aged from birth to 16. Now, a lot of parents are going to be caring for their children over 35 hours per week. There is the disabled and severely disabled child rate of universal credit with the child element, which I know some people will have seen already itself. When it does come to the carers element, you can get the carers element and the disabled child element at the same time. The only thing that you can't get at the same time for yourself is the limited capability for work-related activity element and the carers element at the same time for yourself. However, if you had a joint claim for universal credit and you were caring for your partner, but you had LCWRA yourself, so a lot of disabled couples do look after each other. In them circumstances, you could get the carers element for caring for your partner in them circumstances. When it comes to the other qualifying benefit, so personal independence payment, that's the benefit that's for people aged between 16 and the state pensionable age. With personal independence payment, you would need to be getting the daily living component. So usually that means you need to be scoring at least 8 points with personal independence payment. For people over the state pensionable age, that would be attendance allowance. And it doesn't actually matter which rate of attendance allowance for the carers element of universal credit. That would be the lower or the higher rate. For people that had served in the armed forces, very similar to PIP, there is armed forces independent payment as well. So it would be the same. You would need to be scoring at least 8 points and getting the standard element. And then we have some of the benefits you don't see quite as often. So constant attendance allowance of at least £90.20 per week. And there's the industrial injuries disablement benefit or war disablement pension as well. So these are the qualifying benefits. As I mentioned, obviously people get sick overnight. To get the support for the carer, we might need to get that person on one of these qualifying benefits first. They won't be able to pay the carers allowance until we do. Really important that we do that quickly. Again, local citizens advice will be able to help with that. Carers UK are really good as well with supporting in them circumstances too. If you do need help to make that claim for universal credit as well, there is the help to claim service. So if we could just pop the link in for the help to claim universal credit service, that would be fantastic. With that, they will help you through the initial claim for universal credit all the way through till you do get your first payment. So if you come across someone you think might struggle with the application process, it's a really good idea to use the help to claim service itself, which we will pop the link in there for you. If we could just move on to the next slide there, thank you. So with that carers element, this is actually very similar to carers allowance, which we'll be looking at the moment. So there's only one carer element that's allowed per claimant, and in joint claims, 2 carers elements can be included, providing that both claimants are not caring for the same disabled person. So it would need to be someone separate. If both claimants care for the same person, you would have to decide who gets that carers element. So important to have perhaps that family discussion to see who needs that money most, basically. One of the really important things that makes the carers element different to carers allowance is that with carers allowance, you're actually prevented from claiming if you're earning over a certain level. So that's £196 at the moment. With the carers element, your level of earnings don't prevent you from claiming. So a lot of people that aren't entitled to carers allowance, which we'll look at very shortly, that especially are working, they won't be entitled to carers allowance, but they may very well be entitled to the carers element. So one just to look out for. And again, them full benefit checks, really, really important. Really important as well to note, if somebody's getting what's called the severe disability premium, if somebody gets the carers element of universal credit for them, exactly the same for carers allowance, that can stop that person's severe disability premium. So again, really important to have that conversation with the family. The severe disability premium is usually worth more than the carers element or carers allowance, and the person with the disability will probably be better off staying on that. So just important, again, just to stress full benefit checks for the household in them circumstances. And if we could just move on to the Next slide, thank you. So really important to stress again, so there's no earnings threshold with the carers element of universal credit. So there very much is with carers allowance, as we've just seen. You can actually get carers allowance and the carers element at the same time, but unfortunately it is deducted pound for pound itself. So with carers allowance itself, it is actually worth class 1 contributions to your national insurance, so it is still worth claiming, where the carers element is class 3, so they don't have the same strength. So will be worth claiming both if you're entitled to both, just to make up your national insurance contributions, which of course do work towards your state pension as well. So some people say it's not worth claiming. I would recommend claiming both, but it will be deducted pound for pound. Thank you very much. If we could just move on to the next slide there. So we've mentioned carers allowance and the eligibility itself a few times already. So it's very much the same qualifying conditions. So again, you do need to be caring for someone over 35 hours per week, and they do need to be on the qualifying disability benefits that we mentioned. So DLA for children, for people aged from birth to 16, they would need to be on the middle rate or the higher rate for the care component itself. For PIP, the benefit for people with disabilities and long-term health conditions, aged between 16 and a state pensionable age, again, they would need to be getting the daily living component, and they'd need to be scoring 8 points for the standard rate. For people over state pensionable age, again, it's attendance allowance. And just to remember, with attendance allowance, it doesn't matter if that person's on the lower or the higher rate. The main thing that makes it different with carers allowance is that your earnings need to be £196 or less a week after tax, national insurance and expenses. So there is a lot of pressure on the government to raise that threshold. A lot of people that are working, of course, are going to be over that. In my circumstances, I wouldn't be entitled to carers allowance, but I am very much entitled to the carers element of universal credit, as my partner is on the advance rate for PIP herself. So that's what qualifies us, and that's a top up to our universal credit in them circumstances. With carers allowance, you can't be in full-time education, and just important to check people's immigration status as well. So people that are subject to immigration control or don't have recourse to public funds is the government term for it. They won't be entitled to carers allowance. They won't be entitled to universal credit as well. So that will stop them getting the carers element of universal credit itself. So full benefit checks. Again, once you get through to your local citizens advice, we'll be able to work that out for the household, as we've mentioned. But main thing to remember with carers allowance is very much that earnings threshold. So if people are over that £196 a week, they're working, it's very important that we get them to have a look at the carers element of universal credit itself. Okay, thank you. And if we just move on to the next slide, please. So people that don't perhaps make up that 35 hours per week, they're a little bit less. And this is something that is quite often missed. And we are going to pop a link in around carers credits and how that works. So if you do care for a person or people for at least 20 hours per week, you might be entitled to what's carers credit is. Now, it doesn't work like carers allowance or the carers element of universal credit. It doesn't pay as a benefit, but it does help with your national insurance contributions. So that will work towards someone's state pension. So it is a national insurance credit that helps with gaps in carers' national insurance records. The state pension is very much based on your national insurance record. So just to remember, for carers credits, class 3 contributions are made up, but for carers allowance, class 1 is made up. With carers credits, that will top someone up that isn't potentially entitled to carers element, so or carers allowance themselves. Income, savings and investments don't affect eligibility for carers credit itself as well. So we've popped the link in there for you. just one that gets missed quite often in itself. And if we could just move on to the next slide there, thank you. So information that you would need to provide the Department of Work and Pensions for, of course, the Department of Work and Pensions are very much responsible for universal credit, so will be entitled for the carers element of universal credit, also for carers allowance as well. So they will need the name of the person that you care for. They will need their date of birth. They'll need their national insurance number. Any disability benefits that they receive, remember that's one of the qualifying conditions. So if it's DLA for children or PIP or attendance allowance, they'll need details of that. They will ask the number of hours a week that you do spend caring for that person. So will need to be over 35 hours per week. They will need the contact details of anyone else that potentially is caring for that person, whether that's a severely disabled adult or a child or someone that has a long-term health condition. They will want to know if you receive any income other than carers allowance for looking after someone as well. So if someone's a paid carer, that may affect the eligibility in some circumstances as well. So really good idea just to get all this information beforehand. If somebody's already on universal credit, and they suddenly become a carer, they could call the Universal Credit Helpline to update them. They can also pop that in their journal as well, the Universal Credit Journal. I would recommend doing both, just to make sure that that person gets everything that they're entitled to very quickly. But just to remember, we'll need, if someone's become ill, the person with the care needs, and they're not on that qualifying disability benefit already, we will need to get them on that qualifying disability benefit. And that's something, again, your local citizens advice will be able to help with there. So if we could just pop on to the next slide there. So that gives us the opportunity for any questions. So that brings us to the end of the presentation itself. Thank you very much for joining us. So I will be hanging around for the next 8 minutes. Does anybody have any questions or any comments? No questions so far. Anybody shocked by anything that they've seen, perhaps by some of them statistics at the beginning? No comments so far. We've still got some time if anybody does have any questions or any comments that they'd like to make. Oh, thank you, Emma. Thanks for all the information. It's lovely to have you on board today. And we've just popped in the link for attendance allowance as well. So one of the benefits for people over state pensionable age that might have the care needs that a lot of people do struggle for as well. So there is the information on how to make that claim itself. Just to remember with carers credits as well, that's one for people perhaps that aren't making up that 35 hours per week, but will need them national insurance contributions topping up for their state pension. Quite often does get missed itself. But as we mentioned before, carers are one of the groups that quite often we do come across that just haven't got time to navigate that tricky benefit system that we do have now. So just really important to get them full benefit checks. They do quite often fall through the cracks, unfortunately, in my experience. So very, very important just to make sure they're getting everything that they are entitled to. We've still got some time if anybody does have any questions or comments to make. If people do have any questions to go through, please do pop them in the chat and I will follow up with them. We will check after the session itself. So please do feel free to pop them questions in the chat. We will follow them up with you. That's no problem at all. So we're just coming up to 1 minute until the end of the session. I'd like to say a huge thank you to everybody that has joined us today. A huge thank you to the Royal Voluntary Service for having us at Society Matters as well. If there's anything that you do have any questions, remember just to pop them in the chat and we will follow up and check after the session. But I'd just like to say thank you very much for having us. And I hope people got something from that session itself on the carers element and other support for carers there. So thank you very much.